The Dieppe maps are a series of world maps produced in Dieppe, France, in the 1540s, 1550s and 1560s. They are large hand-produced maps commissioned for wealthy and royal patrons, including Henry II of France and Henry VIII of England. The Dieppe school of cartographers included Pierre Desceliers, Johne Rotz, Guillaume Le Testu, Guillaume Brouscon and Nicolas Desliens. Existing Dieppe maps. The Dieppe maps known to have existed into modern times include the following: Jean Mallard, Map of the World, British Library, London. Johne Rotz, Book of Hydrography, 1542. British Library, London. Guillaume Brouscon, World Chart, 1543, Huntington Library, Los Angeles, California. Pierre Desceliers, Royal World Chart, 1546. John Rylands Library, University of Manchester. Anonymous, Harleian or Dauphin, World Chart, C1547. British Library, London. Anonymous, made for Nicolas Vallard, Portolan Atlas, C1547. Huntington Library, Los Angeles, California. Pierre Desceliers, World Chart, 1550. British Library, London. Pierre Desceliers, World Chart, 1553. Vienna. Guillaume Le Testu's Cosmographie Universelle, 1555. Bibliothèque du Service Historique de l'Armée de Paris. Anonymous, Portolan Atlas attributed to Pierre Desceliers, World Chart, C1555. Morgan Library, New York. Guillaume Le Testu's World Chart, 1566. Bibliothèque Nationale de France, Paris. Nicolas Desliens, World Chart, C1541-1561. Saxon State Library, Dresden. Nicolas Desliens, World Chart, 1566. Nicolas Desliens, World Chart, 1567. National Maritime Museum, Greenwich. Attributed to Nicolas Desliens, World Chart, C1568. National Maritime Museum, Greenwich. Jean Cossan, Carte cosmographique au universelle description du monde, 1570. Bibliothèque Nationale de France, Paris. Jacques de Vaux, Les Premières Œuvres de Jacques de Vaux, Le Havre, 1584, f. 26 v. La figure de l'aftermoitié du globe terrestre avant le pôle antarctique. Bibliothèque Nationale de France. Sarah Toulouse has published a more detailed and comprehensive list of 37 charts and atlases made between 1542 and 1635 and belonging to the Dieppe Norman School of Marine Cartography. The Dieppe School of Map-Making, because many of the inscriptions on the Dieppe maps are written in French, Portuguese or Gallicized Portuguese. It has often been assumed that the Dieppe School of Map-Makers were working from Portuguese sources that no longer exist. It has been assumed that Portuguese cartographers were bribed for information of the latest discoveries. Despite the official Portuguese Política do Siglo, the Cantino map of 1502 shows evidence of second-hand Portuguese sources, and this has been taken by some as supporting evidence for this assumption. A common feature of most of the Dieppe world maps of the compass roses and navigational rhumb lines, suggestive of a sea chart. However, they are best understood as works of art, clearly intended to be spread out on a table, and containing information on the latest discoveries, side by side with mythological references and illustrations. For example, the Desliens 1550 map carries descriptions of early French attempts to colonize Canada, the conquests of Peru by the Spanish and the Portuguese sea trade among the Spice Islands. On the same map can be found descriptions of legendary Cathay, King Prester John in Ethiopia, and the race of Amazons in Russia. Other Dieppe maps also carry fictitious features such as the Marco Polo-inspired Zanzibar Isles Desliens. As with other maps made before the 17th century, the Dieppe maps show no knowledge of longitude, while latitude could be marked in degrees as observed by astrolabe quadrant. Easting could only be given in distance. Mercator's projection first appeared in 1568–9, a development too late to influence the Dieppe cartographers. Most of the Dieppe maps depict a large land mass entitled Jave Le Grande, between what is now Indonesia and Antarctica. In the English-speaking world particularly, academic and popular interest in the Dieppe maps over the last 150 years has focused largely on this feature of the maps. This is because Jave Le Grande is thought by some writers to provide clues of a possible Portuguese exploration of Australia's coasts in the 1520s. However, the most recent academic writings on the Dieppe maps by Carryle, Brunel and King have suggested the maps need to be considered in their entirety, and consideration needs to be given to what they reveal about various influences on the map makers, as well as French aspirations. This group of writers argue that the maps are not necessarily literal records of voyages of exploration. It should also be noted that on the 1543 world chart of Guillaume Brouscon this feature, the northern part of Terre Australe, is called Terre de Lucac. On this chart, Le Jave Grande refers to Java, and Jave refers to an island to its east. Similarly, on the 1570 carte cosmographique au universal description du monde of Jean Cossan, an originator of the sinusoidal projection, this feature is called Terre de Lucac. The Dieppe maps as evidence of French territorial aspirations. Gail K. Brunel's work. Professor Gail K. Brunel of California State University has argued that, although the Dieppe school of cartographers was active for only a generation, from about 1535 to 1562, the cartographers associated with it were acting as propagandists for French geographic knowledge and territorial claims in the New World. The decades when the Dieppe school was flourishing were also the decades in which French trade with the New World was at its 16th century height. In terms of the North Atlantic fish trade, the still fledgling fur trade, and, most important for the cartographers, the rivalry with the Portuguese for control of the coasts of Brazil and the supplies of lucrative Brazil wood. Brunel states that the Dieppe cartographers access cartographic skills and geographic knowledge from Portuguese mariners, pilots, and geographers working in France, at the same time as they were producing maps meant to emphasize French dominion over the New World, both in Newfoundland and in Brazil, that the Portuguese also claimed. Portuguese-style maps in particular became the basis for the work of other cartographers produced for courts throughout Europe, so much so that at times Italian, French, German, or Flemish mapmakers did not even bother to translate the Portuguese inscriptions they had borrowed from Portuguese maps. Brunel noted that, in design and decorative style, the Dieppe school maps represented a blending of the latest geographical and nautical knowledge circulating in Europe, with older conceptualizations of world geography deriving from Ptolemy and medieval cartographers and explorers such as Marco Polo. Renaissance mapmakers such as those based in Dieppe relied heavily on each other's work, as well as on maps from previous generations, and thus the maps represented a mixture of old and new data and even differing conceptualizations of space, often coexisting uneasily in the same map. Other writers on French worldviews and the Dieppe maps. The Dieppe maps all depict the southern continent, Terra Australis, incorporating a huge promontory extending northward called Jave Le Grande. According to the French geographer Numa Brock, Terra Australis found its most inspired illustrator in pilot cartographer of Le Havre, Guillaume Le Testu. Le Testu's Cosmographie Universelle, the sumptuous Atlas Nicolas he presented in 1556 to Coligny, Grand Admiral of France, constituted a veritable encyclopedia of the geographic and ethnographic knowledge of the time. French historian Frank L'Estringent has said, "The nautical fiction of Le Testu fulfilled the conditions of a technical instrumentality while giving to King Henry II and his minister, Admiral Coligny, the anticipatory image of an empire that awaited to be brought into being." In the cosmography, 12 vividly colored charts are devoted to a survey of the fictitious continent Terra Australis. In these charts, Le Testu drew the outlines of an enormous austral continent which covered the southern part of the globe and filled a considerable part of the Indian Ocean. This imaginary land derived from the Antigone of the Greeks and had already been reactivated, notably by the mathematician and cosmographer Laurence Finet and by Le Testu's predecessors of the Dieppe school. According to the Portuguese historian Paulo Carril, the attitude of Le Testu reveals a cultural conflict between the old cosmographic beliefs and the demands of an empirical concept of geographical and ethnographical knowledge. Influenced by the rigor of his Calvinist faith, Carril notes that while on the iconographic side Le Testu depicts an austral continent with strangely tropical conditions incorporating beasts drawn from fantasy and old legends, on the other side he nullifies these leaps of imagination by his admission that the land shown as part of the Terra Australis was still unknown and what was marked out on his map was based solely on imagination and surmise. Dependence of the Dieppe school on the cosmography of Laurence Finet and Johannes Schörner, the cartographers of the Dieppe school incorporated into the world maps the cosmographic concepts of Laurence Finet, the first professor of mathematics at the Collège Royal in Paris. His 1531 world map was published in 1532 in the Novus Orbi Regionum ac Insularum. Finet's cosmography was derived from that of the German mathematician Johannes Schörner. In his study of Schörner's globes, Franz von Wieser found that the derivation of Finet's mapmonde from them was unverkennbar. Lucien Galois noted in 1890, as Franz von Wieser had done before him, the undeniable resemblance parfaite between Finet's 1531 mapmonde and Schörner's 1533 globe. Schörner's globe of 1523 also closely resembled Finet's mapmonde, proving that Schörner's cosmographic concepts predated those of Finet. Albert Antheroem wrote in 1911, one place name in particular on the Dieppe maps, the Bay Bresil on northwest coast, the 1542 Rotz maps land of Java, which appears as Bay Bresil on the Harlian, Bay Bresil on the Desliens and Bay Desliens on Le Testu's Grand Age of 1556, illustrates the reliance of the makers on the Schörner Finet cosmography. Armand Reynaud noted in 1893 that this appellation, without doubt, comes from the globes of Schörner and the maps of Laurence Finet. On Finet's 1531 mapmonde, Brasileigio is shown as part of the Terra Australis lying to the east of Africa and to the south of Java, just where Schörner located Brasileigio on his 1523 globe, and where the Dieppe maps locate the Bay Bresil. Another indication of this reliance is given by the placement of Catigara on the western coast of South America on the mid-1540s Harlian mapmonde and on Le Testu's 1556 map of western South America, the same location it occupied on Finet's 1531 mapmonde and on Schörner's 1523 and 1533 globes. Catigara was understood by the 2nd century Alexandrian geographer Ptolemy to be a port and emporium on the eastern side of the Sinus Magnus, the actual Gulf of Thailand. The 1507 Waldseemüller map shows Catigara in this location. Following the 1519–1521 circumnavigation of the world by the expedition led by Ferdinand Magellan and completed after his death in the Philippines by Sebastian de Juan Sebastian Elcano, Scona identified the Pacific Ocean with Ptolemy's Sinus Magnus, which he labeled on his 1523 globe Sinus Magnus Cov Mer de Sur, the eastern side of the Sinus Magnus, which Scona took to be the peninsula of India Superior where Catagara was located, was therefore identified by him with South America, which on his 1533 globe bears the inscription, America, Indi Superioris Asiae Continentis Pars. Catagara was accordingly located on Schoner's 1523 and 1533 globes on the western coast of South America. Catigara occupied the same location on Finnes Mapmonde, as it also did on the Dieppe school maps. The mid-1540s Harleian Mapmonde and Le Testu's 1556 map of western South America. Le Peupliniere and French colonial expansion. The extent of French knowledge concerning Terra Australis in the mid-16th century is indicated by Lancelot Voice and the Le Peupliniere, who in 1582 published Les Trois Mondes, a work setting out the history of the discovery of the globe. In Les Trois Mondes, Le Peupliniere pursued a geopolitical design by using cosmographic conjectures which were at the time quite credible, to theorize a colonial expansion by France into the Austral territories, his country, eliminated from colonial competition in the New World after a series of checks at the hands of the Portuguese and Spanish, could only thenceforward orient her expansion toward this Third World. He declared, to the ambition of the French is promised the Terre Australe, a territory which could not but be filled with all kinds of goods and things of excellence. Taking up an earlier proposal by André d'Ilbain and inspired by Le Testu's description of Terra Australis, Le Peupliniere described in eloquent terms this unknown Third World, which would complete the Old World and the New World. He wrote, "It is noteworthy that Le Peupliniere believed that only Ferdinand Magellan had actually sighted the southern continent, in the shape of Tierra del Fuego. He was apparently ignorant that Francis Drake sailed through open sea to the south of Tierra del Fuego in 1578, proving it to be an island and not, as Magellan had supposed, part of Terra Australis." Le Peupliniere, the would-be colonist, gave no indication that he thought that anyone, French, Portuguese or otherwise, had visited the part of Terra Australis shown on the Dieppe maps as Jave le Grande.